All right, Mike, let's start with the news in Cruton from down your way. Saivion Jones, 4-star defensive end out of St. James. He pledges to the Tigers on a Wednesday night. What do you know about him?
Seen him play a lot. Physically, I guess the comparison is that he is built along the lines of Arden Key. That's when you look at him on the hoof, that's what he looks like. Lengthy guy. What jumps out at you when I've watched him play at St. James, and man, Coach Valdez got it going there. Just a terrific program at St. James. Is his initial burst off the snap. He is really quick to come off the snap. Outstanding closing speed. I don't care if it's to the quarterback or to the running back. Man, he gets in there, and from point A to point B, he closes it really, really fast. A disruptive football player. Now, physically, he's going to need to get stronger. Okay, that's going to be something he's going to have to work on. But just to compare him to somebody who has not seen him, he is built very much like Arden Key when he came out of high school, went to LSU. Very much along those same lines. Very disruptive player coming off the edge. He's been training at Camp Mula with Ernest Harvey's place down in the home area, and with a whole bunch of other guys. And he's certainly on that team. Now, he's got a player on the offensive side of football and Chaz Preston, who is the number one ranked receiver in Louisiana for 2022 and probably one of the top in the Deep South. So, Coach Valdez has got some players there. Mm-hmm. But, man, he's a very intimidating presence coming off the edge. Now, having lived here all my life, and I was just thinking about this, because I knew that I had heard that he didn't want to have this last out for a long time. That I can't remember the last big-time edge rusher from this area. And I'm talking about the Bayou River Parish area. Mm-hmm. And yet, in one class, you got two of them. You got Saivion, and you got the big guy in the middle in Mason Smith, who's an interior player, but he's the best big man athlete I've ever seen from this area. Not the best football player, best big man athlete. And then Saivion and his skill set. So you're getting a football player highly recruited. He had a ton of schools after him, and he gives you that edge pressure and built off that 4-3 defense. He's a guy that can give you that constant edge pressure. But also his pursuit skills are extremely good against the run. So, and LSU got a really good one in Saivion, and from an excellent program, well coached there. He's played in big games, and he gets it. Again, the one area he's going to need to work on, like any college player, you've got some strengths and you've got some weaknesses. He's physically going to have to get stronger to go up against the grown men that they have at the collegiate level. But it's rare, because we've talked about this so many times. Give me that big-time edge rusher. I told this to Coach O last year. You're going to find the next great quarterback before you find the next great edge rusher. They just few and far between. And Saivion gives you an opportunity to be a guy that can be that consistent player off the edge and be a dominant force. So, and if he gets bigger and stronger, Matt, you got something there. And he's a well-focused young man. He understands what it takes to play at this game at a very, very high level.
Mike, I'm glad you brought that up about the edge rushers. I know we talked about it maybe a bit last week because we were talking about it from the other perspective, right, from the offensive line and how there just aren't many great edge rushers. But one of the interesting things we've talked about this week is as LSU shifts from a 3-4 to a 4-3, it's kind of the lack of that 4-3 defensive end on this roster. When you look at LSU right now, how does that look heading into 2020, transitioning from the 3-4 to the 4-3, where you're looking at guys like T.K. McClendon and Andre Anthony and Justin Thomas there, kind of bending the edge?
Yeah, and so now you're looking at not a lot on the resume.
Yeah.
For any of them.
Yeah.
None of them's got much on the resume. Athletically, you see some skill set there. but not much on the resume part. So it is something, Matt, that I saw this 3 or 4 years ago. It's coming to fruition today. If you look at that roster now that Greenard and Zuniga had left Florida, tell me the guy there. Tell me the guy at Alabama. Tell me the guy at Auburn now. They lost what they got. Man, they had some studs up front and that defensive line. It's just a really, really tough area. I had the conversation with Jimbo Fisher a year ago, and once I finished, he told me, Michael, you're not really encouraging on that defensive line. I said, no, Coach, I mean, what I'm telling you is the truth.
He calls you Michael?
Yeah, he's one of the few. He's one of the few. So that'll call me that. But, it's obvious that those type players like Saivion are just not out there in numbers. That's why he had, not that he's a terrific football player and a great prospect, but what makes him an even bigger catch for LSU is the fact that there aren't a lot of those guys. And if you got them, that's where a guy like BJ can maybe come in and situationally make an impact if he can be that pass rusher. Now, if you listen, and again, I go back to what sometimes Coach O says, you got to listen real well. Every time he talks about those edge rushers, doesn't he bring up BJ's name?
He does.
Every time he brings it up. And that there's a reason for it, that he's doing that. He's not building up this guy for anything that he's not. He's telling you, I see something there. And it's a guy who has recruited and developed 11 first-round pick defensive linemen in his life. So he does know a thing or two about defensive linemen. Matt, they just aren't there. There's not a lot of them. I can find you the interior guys, the edge guys, none. And then again, you look at this year, and there is potential there with who you brought up in Justin and TK and McClendon and certainly in BJ. But there isn't a lot there that you can say for sure that that's what you're going to get at defensive end. Anybody who tells you that is not really telling you the truth, because you haven't seen that. You haven't seen them in an SEC-type setting where they're the starter. You're counting on those guys to come through for you. And if you just got a guy that can rush off the edge, then they run the football at them. That's the other part about the defensive end. I think one of the things with Bo you're going to see is that the difference in the 3-4 and the 4-3, a lot of it had to do with where the fourth guy was going to line up and how you were going to get him to the quarterback, because you could put him a lot of different ways. And I heard Wade Phillips talk about this so many times that was part of why he liked the 3-4, is that he could maneuver that linebacker around a little bit to get pressure. Sometimes it was from an overload situation. Sometimes it wasn't. And he was just trying to find a weakness somewhere along the defensive line to get it. The 4-3-1, if you're light in the backside, they're going to run the football at you. They're going to test your manhood running the football.
Yeah.
But if you got one, and we saw it last year, Ohio State, man, they had a guy in Chase Young that he sort of took your breath away. And, in some of these Big Ten schools, it's like they had never seen Chase Young play. One of the first games Matt, they got a tight end trying to block him. And my thing is, you got to be kidding me. A tight end trying to block that guy? Now, you should have had a tight end trying to help you tackle, trying to block him.
Right.
But sometimes, man, I don't get it. There is a part of trying to reinvent the wheel that doesn't work, and that's part of it. But I do think we're starting to see that more and more. Ed wanted a more aggressive get up the field angle. I think that's always been part of his gig. Get up the field, be disruptive in the backfield, pressure, breaks the pipe. He's always kind of had that mentality. That wasn't Aranda's deal. Mm-hmm. That wasn't his scheme. I think Bo plays into that much, much more. The other thing I think you'll see a little bit more on the delay blitzes that we have maybe not seen as much of at LSU, but I think you will start to see it more and more with Pelini. The problem becomes with this is that a lot of that is timing. and making sure that that player gets where he's got to go and how to do it. How much practice time's involved here, So the young players, that's a negative on that. So that's what makes bringing in Saivion and getting that verbal commitment huge for LSU. Because had it gone longer in the process, I'm telling you, Matt, it would have been a free-for-all after Saivion. That's how, when it gets late for a top pass rusher, man, they got everybody being involved because those guys just aren't there anymore. You can look at it on paper and say, oh, we good. But paper don't play.
Yeah.
Paper don't play. So that's part of LSU's team, and I think they'll be good up front. I really do. But I can't tell you about TK, and I can't tell you about Justin and and BJ and all. All I can tell you about is they have the potential to be good players. But none of us, even if you go to practice, it is the Allen Iverson line. It is just practice. But you get in that SEC game, and you're trying to get your timing down, and the noise is loud, and you're trying to beat that tackle, maybe getting off the line quickly and trying to beat him with your speed, and, you can't really hear well, and you're just trying to sense that ability to get up the field. We'll find out a lot about this team early on because I think if you're going to catch LSU in 2020, you'd better be early because I think as the season goes along, as the offensive line play gets better and hopefully not a lot of injuries or no injuries,
right,
I think so will the defensive line. I think those two areas normally are the last two pieces of the puzzle in place because of the timing part that you have, and you don't rotate offensive linemen, but you do rotate defensive linemen. The rotation part, the defensive line, where Ed has always loved to rotate 8 defensive linemen to find those right 8 guys.
The Saints have added a linebacker. Now, it's not official yet on the transaction wire with the NFL, but Anthony Chickillo's agent, Rosenhaus Sports, tweeted the news. So if the agent's tweeting the news about his clients, pretty good indication that it's legit. So the Saints add a linebacker here in Anthony Chickillo. All right, Mike, what can you tell us about him?
Well, he hasn't done much in the NFL, put
right.
it to you that way. He's a guy that's been strictly a special teams player for the Steelers. And he's been a pretty good one. But he's a guy was sort of a legacy guy for Miami. His dad and his grandfather both played at Miami of Florida. He was a 5-star recruit in the Tampa area when he came out of high school. He just never could piece it together. He was really a defensive end at Miami of Florida. He got picked by the Steelers. They tried to make him into a pass rush, outside linebacker. He's done little in that area. He's sort of a one-trick pony as far as getting to the quarterback. If he doesn't beat you with a speed move, then he stopped. Crazy thing about it is in college, he was good against the run. But, again, he's never developed into that pass rusher that I think the Steelers thought when they made the conversion with him from defensive end to outside linebacker, because he was sort of a tweener-type build, at that 6'3", 260, 265 range. They thought that he could be that type player. Just has not happened. But, man, he is pedal to the metal on special teams. It does go to show that Sean has spent a lot of time putting emphasis on special teams. He brought this up, I know, last year on one of the coaches' shows when we started him and cranked him up about undrafted free agents, about how that's a niche part of the off season and getting those type players and finding guys that can help you on special teams. And it's funny, I just finished an article, I think they'll be out tomorrow and Saturday, on undrafted college free agents, that he signs a guy and he's specialized. That's what Chickillo has done. He has been a sort of a specialized special teams guy, get down the field, and he's made plays on special teams. Just that he's never come around as a pass rush, outside linebacker, / defensive end. Has not been for him. He's got the athletic skills. It's just instinctively, it's not been there for him.
Where would he fit, Mike? I mean, is this?
He's going to play defensive end. He ain't playing no outside linebacker.
Okay. So
He's going to play defensive end.
This is an opportunity for the Saints to maybe try to find a backup edge rusher and / special teams contributor.
Yeah, I think that's what you're looking for this time of year. And I'll just sort of repeat what Sean was telling us about, hey, the guys, everybody wants the high-priced guy. But you got to understand that there are other elements involved here. Because, with the Saints, they know even what they have, $9.5 to $10 million, I would think somewhere in that range today as far as money to play with. You got some major decisions to be made long term. And so what you're looking for is a situational guy at this point. And that's what Chickillo is. He's a special teams guy. And maybe hope that he can make some plays at defensive end. But at this point, I think the one area, if they're going to spend a little bit of money, it's going to be at corner. Again, I think every team feels the same. You never have enough at the cornerback position. It's funny. I heard Gruden yesterday on an interview he did sort of repeat that same thing about no matter how many corners we have, we need another. We need another one. And he brought in Prince Akamura and signed him up. It's part of the league today with so many 3-4 wide receiver sets just trying to match up. And everything looks great in the offseason. Everything looks great when, on paper until you get a guy get hurt. And then now it's the same thing I heard is, well, if the Saints drafted a wide receiver in round 1, he would be the 5th option. Okay, really? So what happens if you lose 2 guys to an injury or one guy doesn't come around? Tell me about that 5th option. The 5th option becomes your 2nd or your 3rd option real quickly. That's not the mentality of most coaches. They want to try to get as much talent built up as you can during the off season for when you're going to have that eventuality that's going to happen, when you're going to have that injury, that you can find a guy that can slip into that position and you don't lose much out of it. That next man up is great. It's great to tell a team that, but there's a reason why that guy is a starter and you're a backup. There is a reason. He's better than you are.
Mike, you're talking through that. I just kept thinking about Kamara. They had signed Adrian Peterson. They had Mark Ingram. And I was one going, what are you doing trading up for a running back? And lo and behold, it sounds like that worked out all right. So,
yeah, it's the same thing last week, okay? Everybody's screaming for the defensive end. We need Everson Griffin, and I get it. And I'm not saying Everson's not a really good football player. I think he is, but there's a reason he's still available this late in the game.
Yeah,
that there is a reason why the Vikings said, we're going to move on. So what did they do? They bring in Ty Montgomery. Okay, if you look back at Ty's past, he played a lot of running back in high school. But when he went to Stanford, David Shaw put him at wide receiver, and he returned kicks.
Mm-hmm.
When the Packers first selected him, they didn't have him as a running back. They had him as a receiver. And then all of a sudden, they got, the 5th option comes into play here. The top 2 running backs go down. They don't have a halfback other than the 3rd string guy. He becomes the running back. And it's been where he's been sort of a niche player there. As a backup halfback, as a receiver, can play on special teams. Sean thrives in those type situations to have a player that is sort of a dual threat because he can play 2 spots for you. He can play running back. He can play receiver. And it does fill a spot there that if he makes your team, he takes a roster spot because he's 2 for 1, that you don't maybe have to keep another player active because Ty can fill in. Now again, he's got to make your roster. He's got to make your roster to begin with. But you can see that that's part of his thinking when he signs someone. It's for the upgrade of special teams, which Chickillo has been a really good special teams player with the Steelers, and the add of Ty Montgomery gives you a guy that has played in this league as both a halfback and a receiver. He gives you, though, that option there. And he's also been used as a return man. Not that they need one now, because Deontay Harris is really good return man, really, really good. But just what you brought up, the same year they've got Ingram, they sign Adrian Peterson, they move up in the draft to get Alvin Kamara. And at that point, a lot of people were like, "You, what are they doing?"
My hands in the air.
No, he was thinking about that. If something happens here, I have another guy that I can slip into that. And we saw early on, it was to find the spot for Alvin. But by the second game of the year, he knew exactly what it was. Yeah. Adrian was watching. Kamara was out on the football field. So, Matt, there's not a team that's got too much talent. You can't, I think sometimes fans got to get caught up in a moment. But you never have that type of football team. I don't care if it's college or the pros. You never have enough. It's the flip side. You don't have enough at a position. So that's why you bring in a guy like Chickillo to help on special teams, and we'll see what happens when he plays defensive end. That's why you sign a Ty Montgomery, to see what he's got as a wide receiver halfback or a running back halfback, however you want to look at it. It's part of the off season that's how you win. That's how you win. You don't do this in August and September. By that time, Ty Montgomery's on another football team. You got to do it now.
Mike, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball. I know you're ready for it, but I wanted to talk about the undrafted free agents, and there is an LSU-related question I want to get to because of something Ed Ogeron said earlier this week. But Sean Payton, as we speak, is on the NFL's Instagram Live. And I'm reading from Nick Underhill's Twitter here, who's live tweeting it, and he was asked, Sean Payton was, Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. This is obviously relevant because Jay Glazer answered again that it's definitive. Taysom Hill's the next guy, no doubt about it. Well, Payton says, quote, "That's what we're getting ready to find out." And then also added on this Instagram Live, Payton said about the two quarterbacks, quote, "Both of them know they got to beat out competition," noting that if they're in the quarterback business right now, they're bringing in different guys, increases their chances of finding the right guy. So that certainly doesn't sound definitive on Taysom, yet there's Jay Glazer saying definitively Taysom Hill is the guy. What do you make of it?
No, it's basically, isn't Sean saying what I've told you now for the last 2 years?
And I agree with you.
No matter what he has said, and I get it, you're in that room, and we don't get to see all the practices like Sean does or the assistants do. But there's a reason that this year, or last year I should say, when Drew went down, despite all the rhetoric that it's Taysom's next in line, you went with Teddy Bridgewater. What did you do right after the draft? You had an opportunity to get Jameis Winston. Man, he had his hand way up in the air. I got it. We're going to sign him. And Jameis comes in. Now, he doesn't definitively answer the question on that part. Well, it's a competition. Isn't that what he's saying?
Mm-hmm.
If that's your guy, don't you say he's my guy?
I would. Unless if you're just trying to appease Jameis Winston.
Well, okay, you got him on a 1-year contract. And that bargain basement price. So I don't know what you're trying to appease in him at this stage. I think what he's saying is the fact that, man, I got a young talent here. And Jameis Winston, I like a lot. Okay, read between the lines. He's telling you that. I've seen him. He started in NFL games, and I think I can work with some of the deficiencies that he has as a passer. I think we can work on some of that. He's telling you that without telling you that at this point. But for him not to say, and I get Jay because he's getting that straight from Sean. Sean and Jay have a very close relationship, and,
right.
And Sean tells Jay a lot of different things and sometimes you can't say exactly what Sean tells you because he'll tell you, don't say that.
Right.
We've been through that already, okay? But I think some of the things here is that coming from Sean himself, he's actually telling you, hey, this competition's on, guys. It's really on. He's not trying to appease Winston at this point because he's only got Winston for a 1-year deal and at a low-rated price.
Mm-hmm.
And if something doesn't happen to Drew physically, Jameis may never hit the field.
Right.
May never hit the field. Taysom will because of his role. it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out, because I do think that, again, more and more every time he tells me Taysom Hill is my guy, he does something else.
Right. All right, one other quick thought, just because that was percolating today. I know we've talked about it a bunch, but something I did want to delve into here, Mike. Earlier this week, Ed Ogeron was on off the bench with Jordy and T-Bob, and he went position by position on the offensive line, his 2 and really 3 deep. Really interesting that he had Anthony Bradford as the starter at right guard as a freshman. But that's neither.
No, Matt, not to cut you off.
Yeah.
He actually told us that on a Monday night show in mid-February.
That surprised me, Mike. I mean, you don't normally just pencil in a true freshman as a starting offensive lineman and call him your best offensive lineman.
All I knew is last year when we did the Tiger Caravan Tour, and on one of the breaks, he sort of leaned into me and he said, "Man, listen, if we can get this guy's weight down." Now, he was a freshman a year ago. He said, "If we can get his weight down, he might be something special here at LSU." Anthony Bradford.
Wow.
And he didn't say at that time he's the most talented lineman I have, but you sort of got to read between the lines there too. He wasn't talking about anybody else like that.
Right.
So you gathered that what he saw here was a guy with tremendous physical skills, but man, he's heavy. He's a big man.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens a lot of times, and all of us that sort of fights it today, that you can do certain things for a certain period of time, and then your weight and your conditioning gets involved, and you're not quite the same player. And I would think for Anthony, a big part of him securing that job and being that top player like Ed has talked about is he better be in shape. Man, you're a 345, 350-pound man. That you're a big man, and you playing in Gainesville in the fourth quarter. Whew, man, it's a mighty hot. And, you playing them games in September and October in Baton Rouge. I don't care if it's daylight or if it's at night. Man, it's mighty humid, mighty hot. Of what is his play like in the third and the fourth quarter? So I think that's also to his motivation to Bradford. Hey, listen, I want you to be that guy, but you got to come in shape here. You got to be in shape. And my concerns are a little bit also about Hines, who's built differently than Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
But because he's big on the backside. He got a rump on him. But man, he is a big center. Woo, Hawks, he's a big guy. But he's also a guy that tips you at that 335, 340 range. And Ed made another comment that I had heard from others about getting if you listen to the interview, and he sort of parroted what he told us back in February in the fact that, okay, he's got to get the snap down. Man, listen, he don't have to tell me. I can read that he's not doing that consistently well, the deep snap. Okay, that's the first and foremost. You got to get the snap to the quarterback. They're playing out the shotgun, 95% of the time today? You got to get that back to the quarterback, and not 50, not 60, not 80, not 9. You got to get it back all the time. You have to hit the strike. Watching back, I think I can remember one high snap this year from Lloyd that Joe sort of had to reach up to grab. Mm-hmm. Everything else sort of hit him square. And what that does is throw the timing off. And I think that's part of why Ed is saying, well, we'll see with Jason. Because what he's telling you is, without telling you, that in what he has seen, that center exchange has not been crisp. But what I caught more out of that interview than anything else is what he said about Joseph Evans, in that he reminds him of Lloyd Cushenberry.
So is that saying, that's an interesting point too, Mike. So is he saying potentially Evans you're looking at as a potential starter at center? And if that happens, then what do you do with Hines?
I don't know. It depends on what happens with the guard situation. So just sort of reading that, and listen, they only had a couple practices.
Right.
So that's difficult. And that's the worst thing about not having the spring from a football standpoint, is that in the spring, you can get down some issues, and you're getting fed sort of with a dropper. You can take that little drop at a time. come fall, man, ain't no time for no dropper. You're getting a tablespoon of it. It's not even the teaspoon variety. You're getting it full-fledged at that point. That, again, that's the big concern for me of what happens inside, the center guards positions and how that's going to work out, because of the fact that I do believe that is going to be a key for LSU in the timing and having that guy that's in the middle that understands how to make the calls, can pick up the blitzes, how teams are coming at you are a little bit different today than it was even 5 years ago. I found it interesting that he sort of parroted the same thing he told us in February. He's saying in May that, Hines got to get the snap down right. What he's basically not telling you is that hasn't been a consistent part for him, that he's got to get better in that area. But the part about Joseph Evans is intriguing, that, he sort of is comparing him to Lloyd Cushenberry. Lloyd's played center all his life. From high school into the college ranks, that's what Lloyd played. Mm-hmm. Evans was playing defensive tackle. That to me caught me more than anything is that comparison he did to Cushenberry. And he didn't have to. I mean, it's not that he was prodded into it. Jordy and T-Bob didn't say, well, compare him to somebody, Coach.
Right.
No, he said it out. He said it to them outright.
Ask Mike, are you surprised that Larry Warford remains unsigned?
Nope.
What do you think is a potential scenario that plays out for Larry?
I think Larry's deciding if he wants to play football in 2020.
Interesting. Okay.
Because he has made that comment to other people before, that he's thinking about it. And that scary part, if you're going to sign him, because right off the bat, Matt, I was getting calls from San Francisco and from Tampa and from out east. Everybody in Chicago was like, man, Wolford's going to come here. It's going to be a quick signing. Okay. Tell us a little bit about Larry. Now it's been a couple weeks. So that there's something there. And I do think that, Larry has not made that a secret, that at least he's thinking about it. It's not to say he won't change his mind and play, because, man, you can't make that kind of money, out on the farm. You just can't.
Yeah.
That he might decide to play another season in the National Football League, but I think that's part of the delay, that I think he's actually kind of running it through his head.
Ask Mike, is Dak crazy for turning down $175 million?
I wouldn't. No, that to me is seems to be fair money. And I'm not one to back Jerry Jones a lot, but I can tell you on that part, I think Jerry went above and beyond to get Dak signed.
Ask Mike, this is Jeremy Weiss, who says, will Corey Foreman's relationship with Mason Smith be enough to pull him to Baton Rouge?
I think that, I don't want to talk for Mason. I do think, he's a guy that, and he's been on the tour. I told him this last time I saw him. I said, Mason, you're like a rock and roll band, a good one. You're on the tour every week somewhere. He's in a new location. Man, Matt, just put yourself in his situation. You're 17 years old, and you get to travel all over the country at one point, until the virus sort of hit in. That he was everywhere.
Right.
I do think that he'll end up at LSU. Again, he has not told me one way or another about it. I do know LSU's in the mix. Coach O, Greg McMahon, those guys have done a really good job recruiting him, along now with Bill Johnson. But I think in the end, I think he's going to end up at LSU. I think that's where it's going to be. And again, man, once he's going to be a grown man, and I'm talking about he's a 17-year-old, man, you better batten down the hatches, because he is going to be something.
Ask Mike, what Saints players, undrafted free agents, make the team?
I think Joe Bacci's got a shot here. I think that is a spot where, at the linebacker position, you could see an opening where he could possibly fill in. But Keith Washington Jr. from West Virginia, cornerback, that's another area you don't have a lot of depth at that particular spot. I'm intrigued with the receivers, in particular Marquez Callaway. But it's thick because of the fact you've got a couple guys that you're bringing back last year of the potential variety in Little Jordan Humphrey and also with Emmanuel Butler. Callaway's been a big play guy. How quickly those guys can come in. Throckmorton, I think, is the one guy I've heard the most about. And I think he's got a shot because he can play 4 spots. I mean, that's not a lot of linemen that can do that. But I do think it's the disadvantage of not having the rookie camp, the OTAs. Those guys are going to have to do it fast. But, again, it's part of an article. Look at the list, and it's lengthy, of undrafted free agents Sean has kept them over draft choices and also kept them over veteran players. He's going to keep the best guy, but I think this year's group, probably more than any other, is at a disadvantage of not having that time. But to me, Joe Bacci is the guy to watch for Michigan State, the linebacker.
Let's see if we get maybe one or two more. Mike, what hurts the most at LSU not having spring? I guess I mean, like, what position group?
I think the offensive line. Again, the timing issues. Got a lot of young players with not a lot of playing time there, and you can teach. And again, it's the teaspoon stuff. Now, when you get in the fall, it's different. I think that's the one area that I would be the biggest concern about. Again, we don't know about Miles, but you're not going to know that until you play a game. How well he handles a play when the pressure's on. They got a 3rd and 11. And the clock's a minute and a half left. Can he make that big play for you? You won't know that in practice. You'll know that in the game.
Yeah. Last one, Mike. We do this quick from Brian on Twitter. Which is tougher, defending Jamar Chase or catching a pass against Derek Stingley?
Man. I think I'm going to go with defending Jamar, but, man, it's awfully close. Both those guys, tremendous players. And, I did an interview last week, and I said this, Jamar Chase, going into what we know is going to be his final season, he's the highest-ranked wide receiver I have ever done at LSU.
Wow. That's impressive. As much as LSU's passing game at times has struggled, the receiver talent has certainly not been lacking. Mike D is with us as he is every Thursday. SaintsReport.com, MikeDetilier.com, Saints News Network at SI.com. Make sure you read his stuff and follow him on Twitter at Mike Detilier. Mike, you're the man. We appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.